Good afternoon. I'm Suzanne Cart, NACCE's Director of Marketing and Communications, and today's webinar is Bringing Social Entrepreneurship to Community College Curriculum with Dr. Edward Rogoff. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or put them in the chat, and I can read them off for you. I think I've gotten everybody muted, but if you're not on mute, please, please put yourself on mute so that we don't interrupt Dr. Rogoff. And now I'm handing it over.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne. And welcome, everyone. By way of background, I'm an entrepreneurship professor, which I sort of came to by accident. I have a doctorate in economics, and I was teaching at Baruch College, and the president thought there should be an entrepreneurship curriculum. Wow, isn't that amazing? And they said, oh, this guy Rogoff, he actually was an entrepreneur, which is true. And so I started teaching entrepreneurship. I've since expanded that to include social entrepreneurship. I'm a faculty member at Long Island University, Brooklyn, but I teach social entrepreneurship at the graduate and undergraduate levels at the Wagner School at New York University. So, and I've written on the subject. I've written some books. I've written books on business plans, and I've written a book on business plans for nonprofits, which is basically social entrepreneurship. So, to get started, social entrepreneurship is the application of business entrepreneurship practices to the pursuit of a social mission. So this is why an entrepreneurship professor can slide into becoming a social entrepreneurship professor, because if you've studied entrepreneurship, practiced entrepreneurship, taught entrepreneurship, you can expand to cover social entrepreneurship, which is about trying to do good. This is the sort of triple bottom line, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, you're looking to do things to improve society, to solve problems, and making money and increasing value of the enterprise is not the primary thing. So social in this context means society's goals move ahead of the individual's goals. And entrepreneurship has various definitions. Entrepreneurship is often closely tied to innovation, but in my opinion, doesn't really need to be. I think anybody who owns a business, runs a business, is an entrepreneur, and that's good enough for me. But many people like to connect it with innovation and the goals of growth and development of their business. And that's also fine. I think it's worth, in a class with students, having the most expansive definition of entrepreneurship possible, and then moving to social entrepreneurship also to make the most expansive definition possible. So social entrepreneurship, how are we going to define it? So a mission to create and sustain social value. What might that be? Solving a health problem, improving the environment. You can go on and on and on. Pursuing new opportunities in service of the mission. So you have an organization that already exists, be it a commercial venture or a social venture, and you want to expand its mission to have service as part of it. You look for new opportunities for that, and those become social entrepreneurship goals. Engaging a process of continuing improvement and learning. So one of the things about entrepreneurship is that it is always evolving. You're always facing new environmental challenges. You're facing new competitive challenges. And so you're constantly improving and learning and changing your organization. And the same is true for social ventures, is that you're in a complex world. There's lots of things going on, and you're you're leading a process of monitoring those, figuring out ways to improve your venture, to achieve your goals in a more complete and efficient way. Number four is acting without regard to the resources at hand. This is a very important distinction about entrepreneurial ventures of any kind, is that entrepreneurs make decisions to pursue goals without regard to the resources they have at hand at the time, because they believe that their goals, their ambitions will attract the resources they need to achieve their goals. Same is true for social entrepreneurs. In some ways, I would argue more so, because a social entrepreneur is focused on these societal goals that attract people, and people immediately say, yes, educating, students who come from families in need is a very important goal, and it resonates with people right away, and therefore it helps them attract goals. Number five, being accountable to in-need groups and constituencies. So if you look at the nonprofits in the world, um, you'll see that most of them focus on in-need groups and constituencies, that they're looking for populations that need support achieving goals that they can't achieve without help. And so one of the things about social entrepreneurship is that it generally focuses on these in-need groups. And then my last part of a definition of social entrepreneurship is number six, is that you measure the social impact of the plan. So this is important. How are we going to hold what we do accountable? Can we measure the results that we achieve? Can we say after we've run a program that we spent X and we achieved Y? And this is measuring outcomes is really an important part of social entrepreneurship. One, because people who contribute the resources want to know what their resources, money, or other things did. And also because you, as the social entrepreneur, want to learn from what you did to be able to improve it in the next round. By the way, anyone has questions along the way, please just, raise your hand or post something. Suzanne is monitoring the chat, and she'll, because I can't see the chat here, she'll interrupt, graciously interrupt, and say what people have asked. So the triple bottom line and the niche social entrepreneurship social entrepreneurs fill. This triple bottom line is businesses have basically one bottom line, making money. Social entrepreneurs have an economic goal. Nonprofits need to make money too. They need to balance their books. They need to achieve what they want to within the resources that they have recruited, and they want to achieve social goals for a specific group that they may be catering to or looking to serve, and environmental goals for society in general. So this is the world famous triple bottom line that people think of when we think of social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurs exist in large part, and many will argue this, that markets are not perfect. Therefore, it's the job of social entrepreneurs to step in and solve problems that markets left unfulfilled. This could be a health issue. This could be feeding people who are poor or have few resources. Governments are not perfect either. So therefore, they don't just step in to fill these needs. And social entrepreneurs can fill the gaps and represent the needs of public and hold on one second, that can step in and fill the gaps. And this represents the best of private and public sectors. And finally, they're mission focused, not profit focused. Yes, they need to be able to balance the books. I say this about nonprofits. We don't say they make a profit. We say that they've gotten that they've achieved their financial goals, which were to basically break even or maybe slightly better than break even. Okay. So some descriptions of social entrepreneurs. So social entrepreneurs are nimble. I've come across many social entrepreneurs who start many ventures and sometimes have many ventures going at the same time. And they move from one to another. They see a need, they move to fill it. It's a beautiful thing. They move quickly to address problems. This is like a business entrepreneur. They see a problem, they develop a plan, they focus on getting the resources, they get the resources, and they address the problem. They focus on solutions to long-term problems such as hunger, homelessness, environmental issues, and health. Um, um, so I'll give you just an example here. I know a social entrepreneur who focuses on the needs of seniors, and he does this basically a community at a time. And he understands what seniors need in terms of of facilities, in terms of food, in terms of health, in terms of advisement, and he sort of has a formula. And he goes from community to community, and he sets up these programs. You can't set up programs that cover vast areas because these populations are, often not so physically able to move around, but he's nimble where they're not nimble, and he creates programs that move for them. um and Okay, let's move ahead. So that's the basics on what social entrepreneurship is. And so now, what are the strategies for engaging students? So let me say, in my experience, social entrepreneurship really grabs students. Students see the need for programs. They see the need to solve problems. Many of them are interested in business, but a lot of them are not. And even the ones who are interested in business see the bigger picture that social entrepreneurs often focus on. So, how can you engage students? And you can do this, I think, in any course. You could do this in an entrepreneurship course. You could do this in a business and society course. You could do this in a leadership course. So, how do you engage students? You identify a problem that they care about. I'd say challenge them to identify a problem. What do they see in the world that's needed? And then let them propose solutions. Have them do feasibility testing. So one of the things I've seen over my years of teaching is that doing full business plans is intimidating for students. It requires doing statements, and it requires have balance sheets, and really students at any level are intimidated by this. But there's a sort of shortcut, which I call feasibility testing, which does basically ask the question, is your solution viable? And so I say there are three tests that need to be met. One is, does the team, if you're doing these projects in teams, or the individual, if you're doing them in individual projects, does the team or individual match the needs of the organization? So if we're proposing a health organization that's going to do testing for type 1 diabetes, does the team that you've put together have the skills to be able to do that? Are there people who understand the medical aspects? Are there people who can do the marketing? Are there people who can do the financial part? So you identify what the needs are that you're going to have to make this organization viable and feasible. And does your team match the needs, or do you need to go out and recruit additional team members? Can the required resources be obtained? This is the second test of feasibility. If we think that testing people for type 1 diabetes is important, can we sell that to organizations that would underwrite the cost of the testing in the populations we want to reach out to? Is that drug companies? Is it hospitals? Is it governments? Can we obtain the resources that we need? Can we estimate what those resources can be in a general kind of way? And do we see sources of those resources that could fill those needs? Is the organization sustainable for the long term? So if we're going to meet a need like identifying type 1 diabetes in at-risk populations, we don't want to just do this for, Labor Day weekend type 1 diabetes festival. We want to do this for long term. We want to have a program that goes on, that maybe goes into schools, that introduces people in other organizations to the opportunity to be tested for this. And we want to be able to have that go on for a long time. So is our plan, is it sustainable? Are the people who are going to fund it, do they look like they're in it for the long term? Does it look like the population is large enough that we'll be able to reach out to multiple people for long periods of time? I think if you meet these three tests, you've really proven feasibility of your idea. And then you can sort of put off or do later on a full business plan with financial projections. So other ways to engage students: have them prepare a market analysis overview in the beginning. So if they think there's a homeless problem in their community, have them do a market analysis. Who's providing homeless services? What do we know about how many homeless people there are? Where are they living? What problems do they have? What programs have been developed in the past that have worked, that haven't worked? So get the ecosystem of this area nailed down. And this is a terrific research project for students, and I think engages them by showing them that there are a lot of organizations that may already exist in this space, some of which have worked and some of which haven't. And I think that's a great insight to be able to for a student to get. Later on, as I said, you can develop a full business plan that includes financials. Maybe at that point you connect with an outside organization like, the Small Business Development Center at your school, to see if they would help students build the financials, because they have templates and all of that make it pretty simple. And by participating in presentations and competitions. So I think once the students know they need to get up and talk about this in front of other people, it gets their juices going, gets them motivated. And if there's a competition format, this is, works for many students to motivate them. So I think there are a lot of easy ways to engage students, and I think you'll find them very effective. Okay, that's the basics of my presentation. Do you have comments and questions?
So right now we don't have any comments in the chat, but let's leave it open for a second to see if something comes through. If anybody has any additional comments, questions, feedback for us. You can also raise your hand and unmute yourself if you need to.
Hi, I just wanted to ask just a clarifying question. So if a nonprofit wants to start, what I'm looking at is like a social enterprise to continue to really solidify like funding for the agency. So you're not always chasing after grants. And so if you start like some type of a profit-making business that could also be a training for adult ed students, would you consider that a social enterprise, even if it doesn't have a social, like if it's not solving a social problem?
Yeah, so I'm a huge believer in earned income initiatives for nonprofits. So if you have a social venture, have a social organization, like a nonprofit, the Parkinson's Association of Colorado or something like that. And now you say like, well, gee, we'd like to get contributions, but we'd also like to create an ongoing income source that supports the organization. And so now there are, now I think you sort of put your thinking cap on and you go, what could we do to create, income for this? So is there some sort of testing that we could do in concert with a hospital? So I'm going to give you an example because this is something I'm extremely proud of. I was the president of the Hemophilia Association of New York, and hemophilia is a disease, a bleeder's disease, and the patients use incredibly expensive drugs. And long story short, this was getting, I mean, literally, there were people who left the United States because they could get, they could get the drugs through a program in France or Spain, and they couldn't get it in the United States. Anyway, long story short, we we created a distribution network of these drugs. And there's some wrinkles to the law that allow a nonprofit to get these drugs at a reduced price. And so we set this up, and basically our membership uses this system. So how many members do we have? About 1,000. What's the revenue from this is $10 million a year. We give most of it to the hospitals so that we say, look, because the hospitals it's a whole other issue, but the hospitals, need to continue to provide care, and supporting them is part of our mission. And part of the money goes to support the association, which gives us about a third of our budget. Now, this has gone on for like 25 years. And so because it was drugs and it was a loophole that we could exploit, it worked great. But I think this idea and the example I use, I love this example, is, Girl Scout cookies. This is the greatest earned income initiative for a nonprofit in the world. And, this started with one group selling cookies and then other people copying it. So it doesn't have to be, super big and fancy, but I really think you're absolutely on the right track to say, what can we do to produce income that supports what our mission is? And it makes a huge difference, a huge difference.
So we have a question in the chat. It says, can you share with us an example of a successful social entrepreneurship model for students to look at as a guide or case study? Thank you.
I think you kind of just answered that, but thank you. I think I'm being redundant. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I could, I'm happy I could do this through Suzanne, is to sort of give you a syllabus, that has like an extensive bibliography to it. I'm a big fan of Tom Lyons, who's at the University of Tennessee. He had been at Baruch with me. He's brilliant about this area. He's written extensively about it. He's given plenty of examples. I'm not here to sell my book, but my book on nonprofits is loaded with examples, from Philharmonic, initiatives to, homeless programs. And so, yeah, there are a lot of resources, and maybe with Suzanne's help, we'll distribute them to you.
Yes, if you want to send that to me, I can send it to Lydia, who sends out our
Yeah.
post webinar email.
Yeah, the name of the book is Bankable Business Plans for Nonprofits. So I wrote a book 20 or more years ago called Bankable Business Plans, which I wrote because I taught these classes where we did business plans and I hated all the books that were available. And so I wrote my own. The book has now gone on into its third edition. And then because a lot of people asked, I did a book specifically about nonprofits. So Bankable Business Plans for Nonprofits.
So do we have any more questions you want to put into the chat or raise your hand?
Has anybody had experience with this in their class?
I'm in the process of taking the entrepreneurship class through COABE. So there's a couple of us in my agency. We're taking the course with Dr. Cheryl Ayers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so we're learning, and we want to see what we can do in the future.
Yeah, no, that's great. I really think that you'll see just doing a simple exercise in class with students, think of a social problem, think of a solution, gets them going. I mean, and they're all aware of social problems. They don't need help to come up with them. You don't need to give them a list. Just get them going, and then watch the wheels spin.
And I believe we have a question from Carrie. She had her hand up.
I don't know if you're talking about me, Carrie, but I don't mean to have my hand up.
Oh, sorry about that. That's
I was giving like a clap because I'm in that class with Melanie as well. And so because it's so wide open, it can be a little bit, at least for me thinking about it's so wide, like there are so many problems, which one to choose. So it can be a little bit, I mean, yeah, so many problems.
Yeah, no.
It's hard to narrow it down and find something that can be approachable, I think.
Yeah, my experience is students will initially suggest issues where they've had some direct experience. Somebody in their family was sick with a disease, a student in their class, was bullied or treated badly. I mean, they've got a real concrete example that feeds their interest in the subject, and just trying to exploit that, to touch that, to get them to speak about it, gets everybody going.
So it looks like that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate your attendance at these webinars, and you're going to be getting a follow-up email from Lydia, who works at NACCE. And in there will be a link to a 5-question survey, 4 multiple choice and 1, open-ended question. And if you have any ideas for future webinars, we'd love to hear about them. So please, hopefully you'll be able to get around to taking that survey. And again, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.